Hey, so tonight we're diving into something pretty fascinating, what it really felt like to live during Edwardian England. And I'm not just talking about your standard history class. No, we're going deep into the everyday lives of families from all walks of life, all across the social ladder, around the year 1905. That's when King Edward VII was on the throne, and society was in the midst of rapid change. Oh, and if you find these stories engaging, I'd truly appreciate a like or a subscribe. I'm also really curious, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? It never fails to amaze me how people from all over the globe are falling asleep to this. Alright, now find yourself that cozy spot, take in a slow, steady breath, and just let your body sink fully into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back in time, to Edwardian England. And trust me, you're going to feel seriously thankful for your modern mattress by the time this is over. So, congratulations. You've just woken up in the Edwardian era, somewhere around the spring of 1905. It's a brisk morning in northern England, in a little seaside town called Moreham. The very first thing you notice is the silence. No cars zooming by, no airplanes overhead, not even the faint hum of electronics. Just the occasional sound of distant seagulls and maybe a horse-drawn cart making its way slowly down the cobblestone street outside. Your eyes gradually adjust to the dim, gray light filtering through thick, heavy curtains. And then it hits you, where you are, and more importantly, who you are in this version of the world. Your morning experience is about to be entirely shaped by your place in the social hierarchy. Are you part of the wealthy elite, solidly middle class, or among the countless working-class families just struggling to get by? Let's say you're fortunate enough to belong to the upper middle class. That means you're waking up in a luxurious four-poster bed, the kind with a thick feather mattress that feels like you're suspended on a cloud. Your bed is dressed in crisp, clean linen sheets, freshly changed each day by housemaids. Several plush blankets and a dense quilt keep you warm, since central heating doesn't exist. The bedroom around you is spacious, with impressively high ceilings. A fire was already lit early this morning by a servant, just to take the edge off the cold. The walls are dressed in elegant William Morris-style floral wallpaper, probably a calming sage green with intricate patterns. Furniture is all beautifully crafted wood, a grand wardrobe, a polished dressing table, and a washstand featuring a porcelain bowl and matching jug. The rug beneath your feet is thick and soft, warming your toes when you step out of bed. And when nature calls, well, here's a bit of good fortune. If you're in one of these well-off households, you might actually have a proper bathroom. Indoor plumbing is still a rare luxury in 1905, but the homes of the upper class are beginning to include bathrooms with actual flushing toilets. So, goodbye chamber pots. Well, most of the time, anyway. Now, what if you're not quite that rich, but still holding it together in the middle class? Your bed's still decent, though it's smaller, probably just a simple wooden frame with a comfortable enough mattress. Your sheets are clean, but they're not getting changed every day. The bedroom feels more cozy than grand, and the furnishings are practical, solid and respectable, but not meant to impress. There might be a bathroom in the house, but it's shared among the whole family. And hot water? That's not something you take for granted. It has to be planned, boiled, managed carefully. It's a bit of an ordeal. But if you're from the working class, then your day starts in a very different world. You're likely waking up in a cramped terrace house, in a bed that's been shared with siblings or even parents. The mattress? Thin, uneven, and stuffed with whatever was cheapest, maybe straw, old rags, or if you're lucky, horsehair. Your blankets are well worn, patched up over and over again. The air is freezing. There's no fire to take the edge off, and you can literally see your breath. And bathrooms? Definitely not. Like most working-class families, you use a chamber pot at night, and in the morning, someone carries that pot outside to dump it in a backyard privy. A cold, shame-filled trek through the damp air. And if nature calls again later in the day, well, rain or shine, you're heading back to that same outdoor toilet. That's the very first lesson in understanding life in Edwardian England. The class divide was vast. The difference between a wealthy family up in a grand home on the hill and a working-class family packed into a modest terrace house wasn't just financial. It was like they existed in entirely separate centuries. So with that in mind, let's follow the lives of three different families dropped into this seaside Edwardian town. Three distinct paths shaped entirely by where they landed on the social ladder. The Taylors, the Goldings, and the Meadows, three families, each transported into Edwardian England and placed into homes according to the social standing of their ancestors. The Taylor family finds themselves in an affluent, upper-middle-class residence. The Goldings are settled into a respectable, well-appointed middle-class house, and the Meadows, on the lowest rung of the social ladder, are placed in a modest working-class terraced home. Each of them must now confront the shock of adapting to a completely unfamiliar way of life. For the Taylors, the day starts with a gentle knock at their bedroom doors. It's their staff arriving, Mrs. Taylor's lady's maid and Mr. Taylor's valet, ready to assist them with dressing. Yes, that was genuinely how it worked. Among wealthy Edwardians, getting dressed was rarely a solo endeavor. "Good morning, madam." The lady's maid greets as she draws back the curtains, letting in a soft sliver of morning light. "I've laid out your morning dress. Would you prefer tea before you change?" Dressing for a wealthy Edwardian woman wasn't just routine. It was more like preparing for battle. First came the chemise, a plain underdress, followed by the corset, a restrictive undergarment so tight it could make breathing difficult. The S-bend corset, fashionable at the time, thrust a woman's chest forward while arching her hips back, creating that iconic Edwardian silhouette. Over the corset came a corset cover, then one or more petticoats, and finally the actual outfit, typically a tailored skirt paired with a blouse for daytime wear. The floor-length skirts, while modest, had a hidden practicality. No one saw your legs, so you didn't have to wash them daily. But they did pick up all kinds of debris from the dirty streets: dust, mud, even horse manure. Add stockings, tightly buttoned boots, and elaborate updos that required another pair of hands, and it's easy to see why the whole process was time-consuming. Men had it somewhat easier, but not by much. Dressing properly involved a formal shirt with a detachable collar, cufflinks, waistcoat, pocket watch, well-pressed trousers, and impeccably polished shoes. It was still too intricate to manage without help, hence the valet. Now let's visit the Goldings in their comfortable middle-class home. Mr. Golding, an office clerk, takes his role as head of the family very seriously. There's no valet here. He dresses himself. Still, his attire is formal by modern standards. A suit, stiff collar, and tie, even just to have breakfast at home. Mrs. Golding is helping their youngest get dressed while simultaneously issuing instructions to their one servant, a maid-of-all-work, responsible for virtually everything: cooking, cleaning, and running the household. In middle-class circles, being able to employ at least one servant was the absolute minimum required to maintain a respectable image. And then there's the Meadows family, waking up to the unforgiving reality of Edwardian working-class life. At exactly 6 a.m., there's a sharp rapping on their window. It's the knocker-upper, a real job title for someone hired to wake laborers by tapping on windows with a long stick. There are no alarm clocks here. The entire family sleeps in a single bedroom. The parents share a narrow bed while the children sleep on thin mattresses scattered on the cold floor. There's no fire burning, so the air is bitterly cold. Everyone dresses quickly in the chill. Their clothes are rough, serviceable, and often patched, a reflection of necessity, not style. Even breakfast reveals the sharp differences between the classes. The Taylors enjoy a lavish spread served by both a butler and footman. Eggs, bacon, kidneys, toast, tea, and coffee, all elegantly arranged on fine china and eaten with polished silver cutlery. Conversation is sparse and formal. The Goldings enjoy a more modest but still respectable breakfast prepared by their maid, maybe porridge, toast, and a pot of tea. Mr. Golding reads the newspaper while Mrs. Golding keeps a watchful eye on the children. Elbows off the table, "Jack," she gently reminds her son. As for the Meadows, they consider themselves fortunate if they have bread and dripping, leftover fat from roasted meat, or perhaps a bowl of porridge. Tea is weak and often reused to stretch it out. There's no time to linger. Mr. Meadows must set off immediately in search of day labor, and their 17-year-old daughter Saskia has been sent to work as a scullery maid in the Taylors' grand household. After breakfast, the daily rhythm begins to diverge even more starkly. For the wealthy Taylors, there's very little that needs doing. Mr. Taylor retreats to his study to read or correspond. Mrs. Taylor might write letters or meet with the cook to discuss meals. Their children are quickly whisked away by the nanny, who oversees their education and daily activities. In Edwardian England, the wealthier you were, the less work you were expected to do. Leisure itself was a display of status. Rich women were not supposed to work. Their responsibilities revolved around social events, personal appearance, and overseeing the house, which in practice meant giving commands to the housekeeper, who managed everything else. Wealthy men might dabble in business or investments, but many simply lived off inherited fortunes, spending their days reading, horseback riding, hunting, or attending private clubs. The children in such families rarely saw their parents. Their time was almost entirely spent with nannies and governesses. Children were expected to be presentable but silent, especially when guests were in the house. I shall endeavor to instruct the children academically, morally, and spiritually, the nanny assures Mr. and Mrs. Taylor, gently ushering the little ones away after a brief kiss goodbye. The Goldings have a busier, more hands-on routine. Mr. Golding heads off to the local council office, where he'll spend the day addressing envelopes, a dull but steady job that brings in 57 shillings a week, a decent salary for a middle-class family. Mrs. Golding manages the home alongside their maid, but the work is still significant: planning meals, keeping accounts, supervising cleaning, and caring for the children. Middle-class families typically did not hire nannies, so child-rearing was entirely the mother's responsibility. For the Meadows family, life is a daily test of endurance. Mr. Meadows roams the town looking for casual work, perhaps carting rubble or delivering goods. If he's fortunate, he might earn 2 shillings for a grueling day's labor. At home, Mrs. Meadows runs a laundry business from their tiny kitchen, washing clothes for neighbors to earn extra income. It's brutal work: hauling water, boiling clothes in a copper tub, scrubbing, wringing, hanging them out to dry, and ironing everything with heavy flat irons heated on the stove. Her daughter Genevieve helps as much as she can. Meanwhile, Saskia Meadows begins her day as a scullery maid in the Taylor's household. As the lowest-ranking servant, she's tasked with the dirtiest and most physically draining chores. She rises at 5 a.m., lights the kitchen fires, hauls coal, scrubs floors, and scours endless pots and pans. Her hands are raw from soap and hot water. "You girls are 10 a penny," barks the stern housekeeper, Mrs. McMullen. "You'll be chopping, filleting, gutting, plucking, and plenty of scrubbing." By midday, the gap between the families is more visible than ever. The Taylors sit down to an elegant luncheon, served by their attentive staff. It's a multi-course affair: meats, vegetables, puddings, each course laid out on their finest china. The Goldings have a simpler midday meal: cold meat and bread, perhaps, served by their maid. The Meadows? If they're lucky, there's bread and cheese. For many working-class families, most meals consisted of tea and bread, with the occasional hot dish in the evening if money allowed. Saskia's lunch is a rushed bite in the servants' hall, leftovers from the family's table, eaten quickly while standing, before she returns to her endless list of tasks. The family's lunch is eaten standing up in the servants' hall, not because they want to, but because there simply isn't time to sit down properly. There's still too much to scrub. You shift slightly now, adjusting into a more comfortable position as the afternoon unfolds. The weight of your blankets feels deliciously warm and grounding as you visualize these Edwardian lives continuing on in their starkly different rhythms. In the Grand Taylor household, afternoons are reserved for leisure and social obligations. Mrs. Taylor might welcome guests into the drawing room, or more likely, she'll head out to make social calls herself, leaving her visiting card at the homes of her peers. Or perhaps today, she's chosen to go cycling with her eldest daughter Megan. Cycling had become fashionable among upper-class women, not just as a form of exercise, but as a rare expression of freedom. "You know, it's strange," Adele Taylor says to her daughter as they pedal gently through the park, "how after being locked in a house for so long, you suddenly feel this tiny bit of freedom." It's a fleeting but meaningful moment of independence in a life largely dictated by appearances and duty. Back in the Golding home, Mrs. Golding's afternoon is far less carefree. There are menus to plan, household accounts to balance, and children to supervise. If she has a spare moment, she might sit to do some needlework or read a piece of moral, improving literature. Middle-class women were expected to be the heart of the home, embodying virtue, setting the moral tone, and keeping everything in order. As for Mrs. Meadows, She's still waist-deep in other people's laundry. Her back throbs, her hands are cracked and raw, but she presses on. There's no such thing as rest when you're working class in Edwardian England. Every single penny matters, and if the washing isn't finished, she won't get paid. Your breathing slows naturally as the story unfolds, your body sinking deeper into that warm, relaxed state. In the Taylor household, young Saskia is now assigned one of the more degrading chores, scrubbing the toilets. She's bent over the porcelain bowl, stiff brush in hand. You're removing all the urine from inside the lavatory, Mrs. McMullen tells her, as if that wasn't already painfully obvious. It's a sharp reminder that the reality of being a servant in Edwardian England bore no resemblance to the romanticized versions we often see in period dramas. This was backbreaking, unrelenting labor from dawn until long after dark. Days stretched to 14, sometimes 16 hours, with only the occasional half-day off per week, if that. Though they lived under the same roof as their employers, servants occupied a completely different world. They used separate staircases and entrances, ate different food, and followed an unforgiving code of conduct. Even within the servant hierarchy, the divisions were rigid. At the top were the butler and housekeeper, who managed the entire staff. Below them were the ladies' maid and valet, who served the family directly. Then came the cook, footmen, and housemaids. At the very bottom were the scullery maids, kitchen maids, and hall boys, often children as young as 12 or 13, working grueling hours for almost nothing. For all her hard work, Saskia earns just 5 shillings a week, a meager sum, but one her family desperately relies on. They need at least 22 shillings per week just to cover rent and basic necessities. Her tiny contribution is essential. As the afternoon stretches on, you feel yourself drifting even deeper into relaxation. Your body feels heavy in the best way, muscles loosening, tension dissolving with each breath. For Mr. Meadows, it's been a frustrating day. After hours of searching, he's only managed to find one small job, moving rubble by wheelbarrow. The labor is brutal, and the pay, 2 shillings, isn't nearly enough to support a family. Still, it's something. I've spent the whole day worrying I can't provide food for them, he confesses. I feel like a useless parent. I can't take care of my daughter. They're all going to be so disappointed. Meanwhile, Mr. Taylor's afternoon couldn't be more different. He's taken his son, Joseph, clay pigeon shooting at a stately home nearby. It's a pleasant diversion, father and son striding across perfectly manicured lawns, shotgun in hand, partaking in what's considered a gentleman's sport. By coincidence, Mr. Meadows also happens to be at that same estate. Not for recreation, though. He's there to shovel manure. As he works, he catches a glimpse of Mr. Taylor and his son, enjoying their leisure time. I didn't like being called by my surname, he thinks, lowering his eyes. For some reason, I couldn't look at them. I didn't want to meet their gaze. I definitely felt that. It was unexpected. The divide between classes wasn't just economic, it was psychological. It shaped how people moved, spoke, and even thought about themselves. The working class were expected to show deference, to know their place, to remain invisible. And what about Adele Taylor, now back at home with her husband and son off enjoying their afternoon? She feels oddly restless, discontent. Despite her surroundings, this beautiful home, her luxurious life, she feels suffocated. I'm a bit resentful of Michael, she admits. He's out there, living the life of Riley, and he can't even be bothered to say where he's gone or when he'll be back. She sighs. I feel like a prisoner in this house. There's this illusion of power, of being a woman with status, living in this elegant home, but honestly, it's all a lie. For upper-class Edwardian women, the gilded cage was painfully real. They had money, servants, and social standing, but very little personal agency. They couldn't work, couldn't vote, couldn't even manage their own finances. Their role was ornamental, to be beautiful, maintain appearances, and produce heirs. Over at the Golding house, Mrs. Golding is busy preparing for her husband's return. The children have been washed and quieted. The house is tidy. Dinner is nearly ready. Middle-class wives were expected to create a serene, welcoming environment, a sanctuary for their hard-working husbands. The fire is lit, the food's almost done, and the children are ready to see their father, she tells the maid, carefully inspecting every detail. When Mr. Golding walks in after a long day, he expects to be treated as master of the house. Why are the stairs still dusty? he snaps. "I've been cooking and cleaning all day," Mrs. Golding replies wearily. "Don't speak back to me," he cuts in, stepping fully into the role of Edwardian patriarch. Behind the facade of respectability, middle-class marriages were often built on partnership, with wives making most of the household decisions and keeping the budget balanced. But publicly, the husband's authority remained absolute. For children, Edwardian family life was nothing like today. They were expected to be obedient, silent unless spoken to, and physically disciplined. "Jack, take your elbows off the table," Mr. Golding instructs at dinner. When the boy begins to cry, his father remains firm. "He needs to understand," he tells his wife. "This is how it was. I hope someday he'll appreciate how important it was to behave properly." For the Meadows children, things were even harsher. Working-class kids were often expected to contribute to the household income as soon as they were physically capable, sometimes as early as 10 or 11. Many left school by 12. Childhood ended quickly in the face of poverty. Protection was minimal, and life was brutally real from a young age. As the evening approaches, the three families begin preparing for dinner, each in their own way, each according to the rules of their world. In the Taylor household's grand dining room, the dinner table is nothing short of a masterpiece, meticulously set with damask linen, fine china, crystal glasses, and gleaming silver cutlery. Every place setting includes a range of forks, knives, and spoons, each intended for a specific course. And what a meal it is! Soup, followed by fish, then meat, vegetables, dessert, and a final course of cheese. Every dish is served in sequence by silent footmen stationed behind each diner, ready to respond to any need without being asked. The atmosphere is one of elegant restraint. Conversations remain polite and carefully curated. Topics like politics, money, or anything remotely controversial are off-limits. Instead, they speak of art, literature, or exchange harmless bits of gossip about members of their social circle. Meanwhile, the Goldings, though far less grand, also sit down to a proper family dinner. It's modest in comparison, but still respectable. Their maid serves a joint of meat with vegetables, followed by a warm pudding. Mr. Golding, seated at the head of the table, takes on the ceremonial task of carving the meat, while Mrs. Golding serves out the vegetables. Their children are expected to eat everything on their plates in silence, only speaking if spoken to. At the Meadows' modest home, dinner is humble but nourishing. It might be a stew, made with whatever vegetables they could afford that day, served with bread to help fill empty stomachs, and accompanied by a pot of tea. The entire family gathers in their small kitchen around a worn wooden table that serves as the very heart of their household. Despite the exhaustion etched into their bodies from a full day of physical labor, this simple mealtime might be their happiest moment, sharing whatever food they have, exchanging stories about their day, and holding each other up in the quiet solidarity of survival. "We've just got to dig deep and get on with it," Mr. Meadows tells his family as they eat their meal. "And the only way you can really do that is by switching off, just a little." After dinner, the evening's entertainments begin, and they are as different as the families themselves. Mr. Taylor leaves his home once more to attend a show at the local music hall. He sits alone in a private box, high above the crowd, separated from the bustling common folk in the stalls below. But for all its exclusivity, the experience feels hollow. "It's a horrible feeling," he reflects, watching the cheerful audience below. "I'm here by myself, and I know Adele and the children are at home. They would have loved this. I miss the kids. I miss being around my wife." By sheer coincidence, the Meadows family is also at that same music hall, though in the cheapest seats way down in the stalls. Somehow, they've scraped together enough coins for this rare luxury. Together, they sing along with the performers, laugh at the jokes, and clap in rhythm with the crowd. For one fleeting evening, despite their poverty, they're not just surviving, they're living. Back at home, Adele Taylor is preparing to host a formal dinner party for some high-ranking guests. The very thought fills her with dread. "I just don't think I'm pushy enough to mix with people who have Cambridge law degrees," she admits. "Honestly, I'd much rather invite the working-class folks from down the road over for a proper knees-up, but I know that's never going to happen." In the upper-class world, social events weren't casual get-togethers, they were strategic performances. Guest lists were meticulously curated, the menu chosen to impress, and conversations carefully steered to reflect well on the hosts. Every course was crafted by professional cooks with the help of kitchen staff, and the extravagance of a single evening could cost more than what a poor family might earn in 2 years. Meanwhile, in the more modest Golding household, the evening winds down with quiet routines. Mr. Golding might read the newspaper in his armchair while Mrs. Golding sits nearby, working on her needlepoint. The children are permitted to play a soft game or read a book, nothing too loud. Later, they all gather for family prayers before bed, a common ritual in many middle-class homes. As night approaches, bedtime rituals once again highlight the enormous gulf between the social classes. In the Taylor household, Mrs. Taylor is undressed by her lady's maid, her gown carefully removed, followed by the corset and several layers of undergarments. Her maid then brushes her hair with exactly 100 strokes before braiding it neatly for sleep. A nightgown, pre-warmed by the fire, is laid out for her. Mr. Taylor receives similar attention from his valet, who helps him out of his formal wear and into his nightshirt. The bed, already turned down by a housemaid, has been warmed with a pan passed between the sheets. In contrast, the Goldings manage their own bedtime routine. Though they undress in private, modesty is strictly observed. Like many middle-class couples who could afford the space, they sleep in separate bedrooms. Night clothes are worn, and Mrs. Golding dons a nightcap to keep her hair tidy while she sleeps. For the Meadows family, there's no ritual at all, just collapse. Often still dressed in parts of their daywear for warmth, they fall into bed, utterly spent. The parents share the bed while the children curl up on mattresses laid out on the cold floor. There's no privacy, no ceremony, just fatigue, hunger, and the need for sleep before the grind begins again. And while the family sleeps, the servants in the Taylor house continue working. Saskia, now promoted to housemaid for the evening to help serve at the dinner party, is completely drained. She's been on her feet since 5 in the morning, running up and downstairs, lugging heavy trays, and washing an endless stream of dishes. Her sister Genevieve, brought in temporarily to help as a scullery maid, accidentally breaks a china cup worth 9 pence, nearly a full day's wages. "That'll come out of our pay," Saskia mutters, clearly frustrated. "We're probably going to be back down to almost zero. I'm not happy, and my parents are going to be furious." For servants, accidents like this weren't minor mishaps, they were financial blows. Anything broken was deducted directly from wages that were already painfully low. The fine china and crystal that the wealthy handled daily were, for the staff, literal weeks of income. The last tasks of the night include laying the fires for the following morning, turning down beds, and placing hot water bottles beneath the covers. Only once all this is done can the servants retreat to their own quarters, typically cold, sparse attic rooms furnished with the barest essentials and offering no heat. While the family sleeps in luxurious, well-appointed bedrooms with thick curtains and roaring fireplaces, the servants huddle under thin blankets on hard, narrow beds in the shadows under the eaves. Reflecting on their experience, Mr. Meadows recalls those early days vividly. "The first few days, before we got the hang of things, it was awful," he says. "But we found our rhythm. We made it work. Still, it could have gone the other way. We could have just packed up and gone home. And now, as you lie in your own bed, enveloped by the warm, comforting weight of your blankets, you might pause to think just how fortunate we are today. Central heating, indoor plumbing, washing machines, dishwashers. All these everyday conveniences would have seemed like pure magic to the people of Edwardian England, even to its wealthiest residents. The physical toil that dominated most lives back then has largely vanished thanks to technology. The strict class barriers that once shaped every part of daily life have softened, even if inequality hasn't disappeared entirely. And yet, despite the differences, many things remain surprisingly familiar. Families still gather around tables to eat and talk. Parents still lie awake worrying whether they're doing enough for their children. We still long for connection, for meaning, for something to hold on to in the chaos of daily life. The Edwardian era may have been a time of stark divisions, but it was also a moment of profound transition, when the old world was just beginning to give way to the new. The old Victorian values that had long defined British society were beginning to fracture, albeit slowly. Women were starting to raise their voices, demanding not just the right to vote, but also to work and be recognized. Technology was steadily reshaping the domestic sphere and the workplace, and the seemingly immovable class structure was starting to feel the tremors of a rising labor movement. In just a few short years, the First World War would arrive like a tidal wave, sweeping away much of the old order and accelerating transformations that were already waiting beneath the surface. The grand homes, once powered by entire teams of servants, would begin to empty as young men left for the front lines and young women discovered higher-paying jobs in munitions factories and urban workplaces. The familiar certainties that had defined Edwardian life would soon collapse and never fully return. But here, on this particular evening in 1905, that world still holds. The traditional structure is intact. The three families, Taylor, Golding, and Meadows, prepare for sleep, each one wrapped in the rhythms of their separate realities, unaware of the seismic changes looming just ahead. As you settle deeper into your own warm bed, you might begin to sense the slow, measured pulse of that bygone era. There are no smartphones buzzing beside the pillow, no flashing screens, no notifications clamoring for attention. Just the gentle pleasures of a slower time, a fire flickering in the hearth, the soft murmur of a shared story, the physical satisfaction that comes from a hard day's work completed with your own hands. Your breathing becomes naturally slower, each inhale and exhale easing you further into relaxation. Muscle by muscle, your body releases its tension, letting itself melt into the weight of your mattress as the story gently continues. In the nursery of the Taylor household, the children are already fast asleep, watched over by their ever-vigilant nanny. Alice and Lily, the youngest daughters, share a cozy room, their expressions peaceful in sleep. Joseph, as the family's male heir, has a room of his own, while 15-year-old Megan, nearly a woman by Edwardian standards, sleeps in her own small chamber near her parents. Mrs. Taylor lies awake, her thoughts drifting to her children. She rarely sees them during the day. They are largely raised by staff, nannies, governesses, and tutors. Earlier, Lily had said something that stuck with her. "I think they're missing us more than we're missing them, actually, because we're having quite a lot of fun." It was an innocent remark, but it landed with an unexpected sting. In upper-class Edwardian households, this distance between parents and children was expected, even encouraged. The belief was that professional caregivers were better equipped to prepare children for the unfeeling adult world they would eventually enter. Emotional separation was considered a form of preparation. Over in the middle-class Golding home, things are quieter but more emotionally grounded. Mr. and Mrs. Golding check in on their children before heading to their separate bedrooms, a common arrangement for couples who could afford multiple rooms. Despite the stern discipline he enforced earlier, Mr. Golding feels a soft wave of emotion as he gazes at his sleeping son. "It was lovely to hold him," he admits. "It makes me feel more like a dad. You know, a dad, not just a father." The distinction mattered deeply. In Edwardian culture, a father was an authoritative figure, distant and formal. A dad, by contrast, implied warmth and closeness. Many men of the era longed to be the latter, even if social norms didn't allow it. In the Meadows home, the entire family sleeps huddled together in one room, bundled tightly for warmth. The exhaustion from a day of physical labor hangs heavily over them, but so does a rare and precious closeness, the kind that comes from sheer proximity, from shared struggle. Their room might be crowded, the blankets thin, but the emotional intimacy is something the wealthier families often lack. For better or worse, they face their hardships side by side. Night has truly fallen now. Gas lights are turned low or extinguished. Candles flicker out one by one. The day has ended, and a new one waits just on the horizon. Each household, grand or modest, sinks into stillness. You shift gently, searching for that perfect spot, as soft moonlight filters through lace curtains and falls across the sleeping forms of these three families. The night wraps around them like a blanket of its own, offering a momentary escape from the rigid codes and expectations that shape their days. And perhaps, in their dreams, they find freedom. Perhaps they slip briefly beyond the bounds of social class and convention, into worlds where different lives might be possible. As dawn edges closer over the sleepy coastal town of Edwardian Morum, the cycle begins again, this time, as always, starting earliest for those who have the least. In the Taylor household, the scullery maid is already awake at 5 o'clock. She begins by lighting the kitchen range, then boils water for the morning tea. The hallboy moves quietly through the house, emptying chamber pots and polishing boots. The day below stairs begins with a carefully choreographed rhythm. The hierarchy within the servant class is just as strict as the one above. The butler, Mr. Dowing, holds command over the male staff, footmen, hallboy, gardeners. The housekeeper, Mrs. McMullen, governs the women, ladies' maid, housemaids, kitchen maids, and scullery maids. As Mrs. Beaton once understated in her famed household management book, the position of scullery maid was not one of high rank, nor is the payment for her services large. In truth, it was the lowest, most grueling job in the entire house. It involved the messiest, hardest labor, and paid the least. For Saskia Meadows, morning arrives far too soon. Her entire body aches from yesterday's work. Her hands are raw from soap and scalding water. She feels homesick, but there's no room for self-pity. There are fires to light, floors to scrub, pots and pans to scour before the cook even sets foot in the kitchen. You must then clean the kitchen, the scullery, the passages, and the pantries, Mrs. McMullen instructs curtly. When the chef de cuisine arrives at 7, you will curtsy and bid him good morning. In the Meadows household, the day begins with a loud knock on the window courtesy of the knocker-upper. The room is still dark and cold. They dress quickly under the blankets to preserve warmth. There's no time for breakfast. Mr. Meadows must rush out to search for day work, while Mrs. Meadows turns to the relentless cycle of washing. Every small task takes effort. Every routine chore feels monumental. Everything takes so long, Mrs. Meadows sighs as she works to get the fire started. It's all just such a palaver. And all you think about is food, tea, warmth. That's it. That's all you want. In the middle-class Golding household, mornings are more orderly, but still structured by routine. Their one servant, a maid-of-all-work, rises early to light the fires and prepare breakfast. Mr. Golding expects his eggs cooked just so, and his newspaper delivered before he leaves for the office. Mrs. Golding, meanwhile, begins planning the day, deciding on meals, checking supplies, and coordinating with the maid. Upstairs, in the Taylor home, all remains quiet. The wealthy family sleeps on, undisturbed, while the house stirs with activity beneath them. Their personal servants will gently wake them with trays of morning tea before assisting them into their clothing. And so the day begins anew, shaped entirely by class, expectations, and the invisible structure holding it all in place. When it came to education, the approach taken for upper-class children like the Taylors was deliberately tailored to prepare them for the roles they were expected to fulfill later in life. Boys such as Joseph were being groomed for what the British confusingly call public school, which in truth meant elite, private institutions, followed by university, and then either a professional career or the eventual responsibility of managing a family estate. Girls like Megan, however, received an education focused on accomplishments that would enhance their desirability as future wives. Music, fine art, foreign languages, and deportment took priority over rigorous academics. Subjects like science and higher mathematics were considered less critical for girls, who were expected not to work but to marry well and manage households of their own. I shall endeavor to instruct the children academically, morally, and spiritually. Their nanny promises Mrs. Taylor as she escorts the children into the nursery for their morning lessons. In the Golding household, education followed a different model but remained important. Their children attended a local day school, as was common for middle-class families. Education was viewed as the clearest path to social mobility or, at the very least, maintaining their current standing. Boys might pursue careers in law, medicine, or the clergy. Girls were still raised primarily to become good wives and mothers, though with a strong foundation in literacy and manners. For the Meadows children, education was far more fragile. Technically, school attendance was required until the age of 12. In practice, however, working-class children often attended irregularly or left early altogether to help support their families. The curriculum was minimal: reading, writing, arithmetic, and religious instruction. And even that was often delivered under rigid discipline and harsh conditions. By mid-morning, each household has settled into its daily rhythm. Mr. Taylor is seated comfortably in his study, likely managing investments or working through personal correspondence. Mrs. Taylor meets with the housekeeper to discuss the day's meals and any household matters that require oversight. The children, meanwhile, are occupied in the nursery under the watchful care of their nanny and governess. Joseph struggles with Latin verbs. Megan practices her piano scales, and little Alice and Lily learn the basics, simple arithmetic and reading. Lily, already feeling the contrast from her modern life, remarks quietly, "We used to eat together all the time. Now we're not allowed to. It's kind of weird." At the council office, Mr. Golding is hunched at his desk, meticulously addressing envelopes. The work is mind-numbing but respectable. In Edwardian society, even the dullest white-collar position carried higher status than manual labor. Boring, bored, boring, he thinks, sealing yet another envelope. This job sums up middle-class Edwardian life. A little stuffy, a little dull. Back at home, Mrs. Golding oversees the maid's cleaning efforts while contributing her own labor. Unlike upper-class women, middle-class wives were expected to be actively involved in running the household. They weren't just figureheads, they were hands-on managers. The Golding children, sitting upright in school, endure a rigid classroom environment. Rows of desks. Memorization. Rote recitation. A ruler across the knuckles for wrong answers or lapses in discipline. Education was serious business, something to be endured, not enjoyed. As for the Meadows family, every member is engaged in hard labor. Mr. Meadows has found day work hauling bricks on a construction site. At home, Mrs. Meadows and her daughter Genevieve spend the day doing laundry for others. Arduous, unrelenting work that brings in just a few shillings. In 1905, laundry wasn't a simple press of a button. It was a physically grueling process. Sorting, soaking, boiling, scrubbing on a washboard, rinsing multiple times, wringing by hand or through a mangle, then drying, weather permitting, and finally ironing with heavy flat irons heated on a stove. I don't think anyone could call this a labor of love, Mrs. Meadows mutters while wringing out another wet sheet. This is just what we have to do to survive. Meanwhile, Saskia, who has now been promoted from scullery maid to housemaid at the Taylor residence due to her diligent work, has begun taking on slightly less demeaning tasks, though the work remains exhausting. She now helps clean bedrooms, dust furniture, polish surfaces, and assist with meal service. I'm proud of both of them, Mr. Meadows reflects, thinking of his daughters. It's surprising to see how much they've changed. Honestly, they were probably a bit spoiled back home. As lunchtime approaches once again, the stark contrast between families resurfaces. The Taylors enjoy a formal luncheon served in multiple courses by staff. The Goldings have a simpler meal, something adequate but modest, likely prepared by their maid. The Meadows? If they're fortunate, it's bread and cheese. Health and hygiene, too, reveal deep divisions between classes. The wealthy Taylors benefit from the relative luxury of a bathroom with both hot and cold running water, a novelty, even in upper-class homes at the time. They bathe regularly, eat well, and have access to professional medical care. The Goldings have a bathroom too, but it's used sparingly. Heating water takes effort, so full baths are a weekly event at best. Still, they maintain decent hygiene and can afford a doctor if truly necessary. In contrast, for the working-class Meadows, cleanliness is a daily challenge. With no indoor plumbing, they use a tin bath placed in front of the fireplace. Water is heated in kettles on the stove, and the whole family uses the same bath water, starting with the father and ending with the youngest child, by which point the water is cold and murky. I remember our bath being in the attic, one woman from the era recalled. A tin tub, loads of stairs to carry the water up. For many working-class families, this was simply the norm. Maintaining basic hygiene was hard enough. Disease, however, remained a constant threat, especially among the poor. Tuberculosis, typhoid, scarlet fever, and diphtheria claimed countless lives. Infant mortality was shockingly high. Around 1 in every 7 babies didn't survive to their first birthday, and the odds were even worse in poorer neighborhoods. Diet was another stark indicator of class. The Taylors feasted on elaborate meals, often comprising several rich courses filled with meat, sauces, and desserts. Ironically, their diet, by modern standards, might be less than ideal, heavy on fat and sugar, light on vegetables. The Goldings ate more simply. Meat might appear once a day, supplemented by vegetables, bread, and porridge. The Meadows lived on what was cheapest and most filling: bread, potatoes, weak tea, and on rare occasions, a bit of meat or cheese. Malnutrition was common, especially among children, contributing to poor health and shortened lifespans. As the afternoon rolls on, the Edwardian social calendar kicks into gear. For women like Mrs. Taylor, social visits weren't merely friendly chats. They were calculated rituals for preserving and elevating one's social status. She would leave her calling cards at the homes of acquaintances. If the lady of the house was in, a tightly timed visit of exactly 15 minutes would follow, covering only polite, acceptable topics. If she wasn't, either by chance or design, a calling card would still be left behind as evidence of the attempt. "I'm feeling a bit resentful of Michael," Mrs. Taylor mutters, watching her husband go off to enjoy his leisurely afternoon. "He's out there, living the life of Riley, and he doesn't even tell me where he's going or when he'll be back." "He can't even be bothered to tell me where he's going or when he'll be back," Mrs. Taylor confides, her voice tinged with resentment. "I feel like a prisoner in this house." And she's not exaggerating. Despite the appearance of wealth and comfort, Upper-class women were often confined by the suffocating expectations of their social status. Their days were filled with hollow social rituals, their decisions dictated by convention. Choice was an illusion. Middle-class women like Mrs. Golding had slightly more room to breathe, though their afternoons were often spent balancing household management with occasional social visits. Mending clothes, writing letters, or keeping up with the household accounts. These were the real responsibilities that filled her day. But for working-class women like Mrs. Meadows, there was no such thing as leisure or civility. Every waking hour was consumed by labor, earning money, maintaining the home, and raising children. Anything beyond that was a luxury they simply couldn't afford. The Edwardian era was a time of great political and social undercurrents, though how those changes were felt depended heavily on your place in society. The women's suffrage movement was gaining momentum, with both peaceful campaigns and militant activism pushing for the right to vote. The labor movement was building strength too, as workers across Britain began organizing to demand better wages and working conditions. Meanwhile, the Liberal government had started introducing early social reforms, including old-age pensions and basic health insurance for workers. Yet for families like the Meadows, these grand movements often felt a world away. "I don't have time to think about voting," Mrs. Meadows might have said, as she scrubbed another shirt. "Not when I'm worried about putting food on the table." As she hangs out another heavy sheet to dry, Mrs. Meadows reflects on the resilience of women in her position. "They must have been made of stone," she says quietly. "They always ate after everyone else, after their husbands, after their children. They were up earlier than everyone, and they went to bed later than everyone. It makes me feel emotional, actually." Later that afternoon, the Taylor children are treated to a rare outing with their nanny to the local park. Even this simple trip comes with its own strict code of behavior. The children must walk calmly, speak softly, and always mind their manners. In Edwardian upper-class families, the dominant rule was simple: children should be seen and not heard. Any deviation from decorum would be quickly corrected by the nanny, who, in many ways, wielded more direct authority than the parents themselves. Back at the Goldings, the children returned from school to a modest tea, just bread and jam, before settling into their homework. Discipline remains firm. "Jack, would you take your elbows off the table, please?" Mr. Golding reminds his son. When the boy begins to cry, his father remains stoic. "He needs to understand," he tells his wife. "This is how it was. This is the way things had to be." At the Meadows home, the children don't get a break after school. They jump straight into chores, fetching water, carrying coal, looking after their younger siblings. In working-class homes, childhood was brief. There was little room for innocence when survival depended on shared responsibility. As evening approaches, the familiar cycle repeats. Meals are prepared, routines are followed, and each family returns to its assigned place within the Edwardian hierarchy. But for the servants in the Taylor home, the work is far from over. While the family settles in for the night, the staff continues cleaning, polishing silver, preparing clothes, and laying out what will be needed for the next day. Scullery maids, like Saskia once was, often began their days at 5 or 6 in the morning and didn't collapse into bed until 10 p.m. That made for a 17-hour workday, often without rest. One historian simply put it, barely a break. As you listen, you may feel yourself slowly slipping into a deeper state of comfort, imagining the distant rhythm of this world so unlike your own. Your breath deepens, becomes more even. The weight of your body feels secure against the mattress, grounding you in the present while your mind wanders back. As twilight settles over Edwardian Morum, the town begins to glow. Gas lamps flicker to life in homes across the streets. The Grand Taylor residence is ablaze with light. Gas chandeliers in the main rooms, oil lamps and candles flickering softly in the bedrooms. The Goldings, more modest in means, use gas lights sparingly, relying on candles where possible. The Meadows family, watching every penny, light only a few candles and use them sparingly to make them last. Electric lighting had just begun appearing in the wealthiest homes, but it remained a novelty. Most Edwardian interiors were lit in a way that would feel dim and flickering to modern eyes. Reading or sewing by candlelight meant wrestling with shifting shadows, constantly trimming wicks and refilling oil. It was a slower world, a darker one, both literally and figuratively. Your eyelids grow heavier now, your muscles softening with each breath as you picture these parallel lives playing out beneath a shared sky. Evening in Edwardian England brought with it its own unique rhythms, rituals, and routines that reflected one's place in society. As night fell, the warm glow of gas lamps and candles created little islands of light in the growing dark. In the Grand Taylor house, preparations for dinner are already in full motion. The cook adds finishing touches to the elaborate menu in the kitchen, while footmen polish silver and crystal in the dining room. Upstairs, the family is dressing for dinner, an event that demands full transformation. For Mrs. Taylor, it means changing not just her dress, but her entire silhouette. Even her undergarments are different for evening wear. Her lady's maid helps her into a formal gown, often silk, satin, or velvet, adorned with lace, beads, or intricate embroidery. The bodice is low-cut to showcase jewelry, and the skirt sweeps the floor in a graceful train. Her hair is styled elaborately, perhaps with jeweled combs or fresh flowers. Gloves, reaching past the elbow, are essential. The final detail? Jewelry, diamonds, if they had them, or whatever finery they could afford. Men had it only slightly easier. Mr. Taylor dons his evening attire, a black tailcoat, white waistcoat, crisp white shirt with a stiff wing collar, and a black bow tie. This level of formality wasn't optional. Even if they were dining alone as a family, this was simply what was expected of their class. The Goldings' dinner is much simpler, though still dignified. Mr. Golding might swap jackets, but full formal wear is saved for special occasions. Their meal is hearty, not elaborate. The maid serves the food and then withdraws, leaving the family to eat in private. The conversation is more relaxed than in the Taylor home, though still measured. The children are expected to speak only when spoken to, and even then, politely. I think it would be nice to just talk to my children whenever I want, Mr. Golding reflects quietly. To hold them when they're sad. To just have a real conversation. But we're not even allowed to do that. In the Meadows household, the family eats together around the kitchen table. It might be a simple stew or a pot of soup kept warm on the stove. Despite the exhaustion of the day, this mealtime might be their most cherished. It's a rare pause, an island of togetherness in the middle of hardship. Beyond the watchful eyes of employers and the constant pull of physical labor, Edwardian families found ways to relax in the evenings, ways that might feel quaint or even foreign to us today. There were no televisions, no smartphones, no streaming platforms. Entertainment was rooted in conversation, music, games, and books. In the Taylor household, evening pastimes were rigidly divided along gender lines. After dinner, the men lingered at the table with port and cigars, discussing politics, business matters, or sports, topics deemed too controversial or indelicate for women. The ladies, meanwhile, withdrew to the drawing room for coffee and polite conversation, restricted to fashion, social events, or mild gossip about mutual acquaintances. Later in the evening, the two groups would reunite. There might be live music, with Mrs. Taylor or Megan playing the piano and singing. Card games such as whist or bridge were popular, as were board games like chess or backgammon. Reading aloud was another cherished form of entertainment. Works by Dickens, Trollope, or the newer literary sensation H.G. Wells were read chapter by chapter, with family members taking turns. Poetry was also beloved. Tennyson, Browning, and Kipling often made appearances in the drawing room repertoire. The Goldings enjoyed similar activities, though on a simpler scale. Their piano was likely an upright rather than a grand, and many of their books were borrowed from the local lending library instead of owned. But the pattern of their evenings, music, reading, light games, closely mirrored that of their wealthier counterparts. Evenings for the Meadows were simpler still, but often no less meaningful. They might sing together, especially if the family owned a cherished songbook, a common possession in working-class homes. If someone could read well, they might share stories from a newspaper or a penny dreadful, the affordable, sensational fiction popular among working families. Card games, checkers, or storytelling were common. In homes where books were rare, a single newspaper or printed pamphlet could provide hours of shared entertainment. Reading material also varied sharply by class. The Taylors might subscribe to esteemed publications like The Times or literary magazines such as The Strand. The Goldings favored papers like the Daily Mail, launched in 1896 and aimed at the new lower middle class. as well as magazines like Pearson's or The Windsor. The Meadows often read The People or Lloyd's Weekly News, affordable periodicals written for working-class audiences, featuring more sensational content and accessible language. Books, being expensive, were not common purchases in most households. But thanks to philanthropists like Andrew Carnegie, who funded the construction of over 660 public libraries in Britain and Ireland, reading became more accessible. These libraries offered working and middle-class families free access to books they could never afford to buy. As the evening wore on, the youngest children were the first to head to bed. In the Taylor home, the bedtime routine was entirely managed by the nanny. She oversaw the weekly bath. Daily bathing was rare even among the wealthy, ensured teeth were brushed with salt or soda toothpaste was only just becoming available, heard the children's prayers, and tucked them into bed with strict reminders. "Remember," she whispered, "you mustn't disturb Mama and Papa downstairs." In the Golding household, Mrs. Golding handled the bedtime ritual, perhaps reading a story aloud from a magazine like Little Folks or the Boy's Own Paper. Mr. Golding might appear to say good night, but overt affection or emotional displays were generally discouraged. For the Meadows children, bedtime was a stripped-down version of the same tradition, a quick wash at the kitchen sink, prayers whispered while kneeling beside the bed, and then into the shared bed or onto a mattress on the floor. Despite the lack of comfort, bedtime could still be sacred, a lullaby sung softly, or a story remembered and retold. In this one regard, the poorest homes could be just as rich as the grandest ones. Adults stayed up a bit later, but not for long. Without electric lighting to extend the day artificially, most Edwardians followed the sun's natural rhythm. Bedtime usually fell between 10 and 11 p.m., especially for those who had to wake early for work. Before anyone could sleep, there was the matter of securing the home. In grand houses like the Taylors', this task fell to the butler. He would check that every door and window was locked, ensure fires were safely banked or extinguished, and extinguish the gas lights. In middle-class homes, Mr. Golding handled these duties himself, moving from room to room by candlelight, checking latches and flames. For the Meadows family, the routine was simpler, fewer rooms, but just as much caution. Fire was a constant danger in cramped terraced housing, and one accident could cost a family everything. Home security was no less serious. In an era before dependable police protection, safety measures varied by class. Wealthy homes had intricate locks, even rudimentary alarm systems, and the butler might sleep near the silver cabinet as a further precaution. Middle-class families relied on strong locks and perhaps a dog. Working-class neighborhoods relied on community vigilance. Someone was always awake, always listening. As the Edwardian day drew to a close, another key dimension of life lingered in the background: health. In 1905, medical care was primitive by modern standards. There was no national health service, no antibiotics, and few effective diagnostics or surgical techniques. If a member of the Taylor family fell ill, a private physician would be summoned to the house. Treatments, however, were often as dangerous as the ailments. Bloodletting was still practiced, and medicines frequently contained alcohol, opium, or even cocaine. Still, the wealthy had access to the best care available, including nurses and convalescence facilities. The Goldings, too, might call in a doctor, but cost was always a concern. A single visit could strain the household budget. As a result, they often turned first to home remedies and only sought medical advice when truly necessary. For the Meadows family, illness was a crisis. A day off work meant a day without income. Doctors were prohibitively expensive, so the family relied on patent medicines, folk cures, and sheer endurance. Charity hospitals existed, but were often humiliating and offered only the most basic care. Many poor families suffered and died from conditions that today would be easily treatable. The disparity in life expectancy was striking. A boy born into a professional class family in 1905 might expect to live to 54. A boy born to a laborer might live only to 38. Across all classes, infant mortality was high, but it soared in poor communities. Common killers included tuberculosis, pneumonia, and typhoid. Children were vulnerable to diphtheria, scarlet fever, measles, and even minor infections. Before antibiotics, even a small cut could turn fatal. And yet, as the three families retire for the night, they face these risks with the same quiet strength that defined the era. None of them knows what's coming, that within a decade, the world they live in will be utterly transformed. The First World War will tear down much of what they take for granted. Class divisions will be shaken by the leveling experience of the trenches. Servant classes will vanish, young men lost in battle, young women discovering better work in factories and offices. Universal suffrage and the rise of the Labour Party will reshape British politics. But for now, on this quiet night in 1905, the future remains a mystery. The Taylors retreat to separate, well-appointed bedrooms, assisted by personal staff. The Goldings check on their sleeping children before heading to their own modest rooms. The Meadows, as always, gather in their single shared space, huddled close for warmth and comfort, wrapped in the only certainty they have, each other. And as you lie back, the familiar weight of your own blankets grounding you in the present, you may find yourself reflecting on how much has changed in just over a century. Even the wealthiest Edwardians would have found today's social freedoms almost unimaginable. The idea that individuals could choose their careers irrespective of birth, marry purely for love across class boundaries, or simply live as they please without being shackled by rigid social codes, this would have felt revolutionary to their sensibilities. And yet, despite the vast changes, some truths have remained constant. The love shared between parents and children, the comfort of sitting around a family table, the joy of telling stories in the quiet of the evening. These fundamental experiences seem to transcend both time and social constructs. In the Taylor home, the last lights are being extinguished by the servants. Mrs. Taylor lies in her soft bed, comforted by luxury, but her mind is elsewhere, thinking about her children and wondering whether such strict emotional distance between parent and child is truly necessary. In his own adjacent room, Mr. Taylor drifts towards sleep, feeling a pang of longing. I miss the kids, he thinks to himself. And I miss being around my wife. He sighs softly. I don't think there's such a thing as the Edwardian family, not really. Back at the Goldings, Mr. Golding commits a quiet act of rebellion against the emotionally distant norms of his era. He walks into his son's room and places a gentle kiss on the boy's forehead. It's a small gesture, one that would have been frowned upon in Edwardian society, but to him, it feels necessary. The Edwardian father, he reflects, needs to understand that showing emotion isn't such a terrible thing. As he watches his son sleep, the boundaries between roles begin to blur. He doesn't just feel like a father. I'm a dad, he realizes. Not just a father. In the Meadows household, the entire family sleeps side by side, wrapped in blankets and pressed close together for warmth. Despite the physical fatigue, the shared space breeds emotional closeness. There's no room to hide, no doors, no servants, no hierarchy. Just presence. Just family. I think it pushed us to our limits, Mr. Meadows admits. But as a family, I think we actually did really well. As the night deepens over Edwardian Moorham, a hush falls across Albert Road. The only sounds now are the gentle crash of waves in the distance, the rhythmic clop of a late-night cab on cobblestones, and the soft, even breathing of those asleep in their beds. The gap between the classes still stretches wide, but in sleep, all are equal. The affluent Taylors, wrapped in silk nightclothes. The respectable Goldings, dressed in proper cotton nightshirts. And the working-class Meadows, wearing whatever garments they can layer to stay warm. They all dream. They all rest. They all prepare for another day in a complex, carefully ordered world. Your own breathing grows slower, deeper, as you picture this world gently turning. Your body feels heavy in the most satisfying way, muscles relaxing, limbs sinking into the mattress. The blanket around you feels safe and secure. Morning comes again to Morecambe Bay, crisp and clear. And as it always does, the daily routine begins anew. Servants rise before dawn to light fires, boil water, and ready the household for the day. Every movement is choreographed. Every responsibility assigned. The structured rhythm of Edwardian life offers a kind of certainty that, to some, might even feel enviable. Everyone knew their place. The rules, though often stifling, were clear. And that clarity brought a strange comfort. But beneath the polished surface, change was already building. Women were pushing harder for the vote and greater independence. Workers were organizing for improved conditions. Technology was beginning to reshape daily life. The old certainties were already showing cracks, even if few recognized them at the time. You settle even deeper into your own bed, your breath soft and steady, as that delicious sensation of melting into the mattress spreads across your limbs. Our journey continues, tracing the daily lives of three very different Edwardian families, each navigating a society suspended between the past and the future. For the Taylor family, life remains one of luxury and carefully maintained appearances. They are supported by an invisible army of servants whose labor makes their comfort possible. For the Goldings, life is a balancing act, work, decorum, and social respectability must all be managed with just one maid and a rigid set of standards. And for the Meadows, each day is a struggle for survival, with every member of the household contributing whatever labor they can to scrape by. But as the week progresses, something begins to shift. Each family finds ways, small, subtle ways, to adjust to the strict contours of Edwardian life. In the Taylor household, Mrs. Taylor and her daughter Megan discover a surprising freedom in a simple activity: riding bicycles through the park. The bicycle had become a quiet symbol of women's liberation, giving them physical autonomy and encouraging more practical clothing. "It's strange," Adele says to Megan, pedaling through the park with the wind in her hair. "After being locked up in a house all day, it feels like I just got this tiny bit of freedom. I don't want to go home yet." For women raised in a world where nearly every decision was made for them, even that brief ride offered a sense of possibility. Mr. Taylor, too, begins to recognize what he's lost. Despite all the comforts of his class, he finds himself missing something intangible but vital: his family. After a lonely night at the music hall, surrounded by opulence but no companionship, the emptiness hits him. "I miss the kids," he whispers, "and I miss being around the wife." In the Golding home, Mr. Golding faces his own internal conflict. He wants to comfort his son, to be warm and emotionally available, but Edwardian ideals demand a different performance. "I'd like to think that children will one day understand how important it was to behave properly 100 years ago," he rationalizes. "But maybe we don't behave as kindly now as they used to." Still, in private, he can't hold back. One night, he picks up his young son Jack and simply holds him, something the perfect Edwardian father would never do. "It's the first time I've held him," he thinks, stunned by the emotion it stirs. "It was lovely. Really lovely. I feel like a dad now, not just a father." For the Meadows, Edwardian life is unrelentingly hard, but their bond grows stronger with each day. "We've been pushed to the maximum," Mr. Meadows reflects. "But we've done well. We've done really well." And Mrs. Meadows, watching her daughters toil and adapt, begins to truly appreciate the women who came before. "The women of the 1900s, she says softly, voice catching. "They must have been absolutely rock-like. They were always the last to sleep, and the first to rise, especially when it came to serving the needs of their children." For Mrs. Meadows and women like her, every moment was devoted to others. And yet, her daughters, Saskia and Genevieve, surprised even themselves with how well they adapted to lives of domestic service and relentless physical labor. Saskia, who had initially been horrified by the demands of her role as a scullery maid, had now earned a promotion to housemaid through consistent, tireless effort. "I just know I have to get on with it now," she says, "so I might as well do it in a nice fashion." In doing so, she uncovers a quiet strength she didn't realize she had. As the week draws to a close, all three families have arrived at a deeper understanding of their ancestors' lives, something no history book could ever truly convey. They felt firsthand the discomfort, the duty, the invisible rules, and the weight of social expectation that defined Edwardian England. The Taylors, despite their affluence, have come to realize that wealth and privilege carry their own burdens: the emotional distance between parents and children, the rigid schedule of social obligations, and the constant performance demanded of upper-class life. "Living like this, I feel more detached from my ancestors," Mr. Taylor reflects. "It's fun to do all the great things, to experience the luxury. But I don't want to do it alone. I really don't. I want to do it with my family." The Goldings have learned that middle-class respectability wasn't just about income, it was built on strict adherence to social codes. Everything from clothing to conversation, from meal etiquette to child discipline, was governed by the unspoken laws of class. "We're bloody lucky," Mr. Golding says, thinking back on his lineage. "We're lucky to be here, and lucky to be how we are." The Meadows, perhaps more than anyone, have gained a profound respect for the toughness of their working-class ancestors. "I honestly don't know how they managed to live like this," Mr. Meadows admits. "We found it hard with just the four of us crammed in this house for 5 days. They lived like this every single day. It must have been so hard. Honestly, it's heartbreaking. As your own body sinks deeper into comfort, your muscles loosening and your breath growing slower, you might pause to reflect on what these Edwardian lives can teach us." That era stood at the cusp of transformation, caught between the fading traditions of the Victorian past and the accelerating momentum of the modern world. In many ways, it was the childhood of our current age. The rigid class structures that once dictated every detail of life have largely disappeared, though inequality still lingers in different forms. Gender roles that once boxed men and women into strict categories have softened, allowing more room for freedom, expression, and individual choice. The technologies that were just beginning to emerge, electricity, automobiles, telephones, have since reshaped our lives completely. And yet, some things haven't changed at all. Across time, across class, across the shifting fabric of society, the essential human needs endure. The need for love, the desire for safety, the comfort of belonging, the pleasure of food, laughter, story, and rest. These threads stretch across generations, tying us to the Edwardians not just by history, but by heart. Your breathing deepens again, naturally, steadily. Your limbs feel heavy now, your body melting into the mattress with every gentle breath. The comforting weight of your blanket spreads from your shoulders to your toes, a warmth that settles into stillness. And now, the final night in Edwardian Morum. In the Taylor home, the familiar bedtime rituals unfold one last time. Mrs. Taylor is assisted out of her gown by her lady's maid. Her hair is carefully unpinned and brushed smooth. Her face is cleansed with cold cream. In his own bedroom, Mr. Taylor receives help from his valet, changing into his nightclothes with practiced ease. Their children are tucked in by the nanny, perhaps with a little more tenderness than Edwardian formality would have allowed. In their shared room, the youngest, Lily and Alice, lie awake, whispering softly to each other. "I think when we get home," Lily says, "I'm going to appreciate Mommy and Daddy more. I miss eating together, playing games, and Daddy reading us stories." In the Golding house, Mrs. Golding checks the fire to make sure it's safely banked for the night, while Mr. Golding locks the doors and windows. Their children are already asleep, worn out from a day of Edwardian discipline and routine. He pauses at his son's bedside and, in another quiet break from Edwardian propriety, gently strokes the boy's hair. "I can't wait to be able to talk to my children whenever I feel like it," he thinks. To hold them when they're sad, to have real conversations. In the Meadows' tiny home, the entire family huddles together in a single bedroom. Their bodies, wrapped close under layered blankets, find warmth in proximity. And despite everything, the aching, the cold, the hunger, there's a quiet satisfaction here. They've endured. They've made it. This was their life, Mr. Meadows reflects, thinking of the people who came before him. The real people, the ones who lived like this, every single day. They didn't know any different. So I guess, you just got on with it. Your breath slows again. Your eyelids grow heavier. Each blink lingers longer than the last, drifting gently toward rest. Night falls for the final time on Edwardian Morum. Gas lamps flicker out. Candles are snuffed. The only sounds are the hush of waves rolling onto shore, the soft tread of a horse-drawn cab, and the calm, even breath of sleepers in their beds. Your own breath settles into that perfect rhythm, slow, deep, and steady. Your body relaxes further, sinking into the warmth of the present moment. The Edwardian era was, in many ways, a twilight, a last glimmer of golden ritual and rigid tradition, just before the storm of war, of progress, of radical change. And in 1905, no one could have imagined just how quickly it would all vanish. The Great War, the Russian Revolution, the collapse of once mighty empires, the emergence of technologies and new social movements, all were just on the horizon. And yet, our three families, curled up in their respective beds along quiet Albert Road, had no idea they were living through the final breaths of one era and the trembling birth of another. Like all of us in our own time, they stood unknowingly at the threshold of history in the making, unaware of the transformations about to sweep their world away. Your thoughts begin to drift, weightless now, like clouds floating across a clear summer sky. They grow lighter, softer, less defined, each one slowly fading into the space between wakefulness and dreams. As dawn rises on their final day in 1905, the families will prepare to return to their present lives, carrying with them more than just memories. They'll bring back a renewed understanding of their ancestors and a deeper appreciation for the freedoms, the choices, and the comforts they enjoy today. They've glimpsed a world both alien and familiar. They've seen versions of themselves in the Edwardian mirror, recognizing the echoes of old customs, while also standing in awe at how profoundly the world has changed. That little girl who once lived in the grand house may have grown into a soldier's mother, watching her son march off to the trenches. The dutiful clerk may have lost everything, sons, certainty, and even faith, in a war that spared no class. And the humble laborer or seamstress might have witnessed their children rise through the social ranks, lifted by the shifting winds of post-war opportunity. History is not merely a sequence of distant dates or dusty pages. It is the breath, the ache, the hope of ordinary people, each one facing their own share of worry, wonder, and quiet joy. Our ancestors were not so unlike us in their core humanity. It's just the shape of their world that was different, the rules, the tools, the pace. But their hearts beat to rhythms we still understand. Now your body feels wonderfully heavy, as if the mattress beneath you is gently cradling every muscle, every joint, in perfect support. You are completely at ease. That comfortable weight spreads across you, arms, chest, legs, until it feels as though you're gently sinking into the warmth of your bed, carried safely towards sleep. Imagine the night sky over Edwardian Morecambe. No electric glare polluting the heavens, just a sky awash with brilliant stars, clear and countless. A shimmering canopy stretching from horizon to horizon. Perhaps our three families looked up at that same sky, each from their own modest window or garden path, and for a brief moment, they felt connected to something larger, something timeless, just as we do when we gaze upward and fall quiet. Your eyelids are growing heavier now. Each blink lingers longer. Your eyes begin to stay closed, more and more, as if they know it's time to let go. That's it. Just let them fall closed naturally, whenever they wish. There's nothing more to do, nothing more to think about, just a deepening sense of calm. The world of 1905 has faded into the past, but its imprint remains, in our words, our buildings, our customs, and the quiet stories passed down through generations. We carry the past with us, whether or not we notice, just as we carry the echoes of those who came before, stitched into our very being. The Edwardian age, with its sharp contrast between splendor and struggle, its ironclad rules and glimmers of progress, offers us a mirror. In its surface, we can see ourselves, our own time, our own choices, reflected back at us more clearly. The inequalities they faced, the technologies they marveled at, the social upheavals that redefined their world, they all have their modern parallels. The fundamental questions remain unchanged. How do we live alongside one another? How do we balance tradition with transformation? How do we make meaning in the brief span of life we're given? Your breath has settled into that perfect rhythm, deep, slow, steady. With each inhale, you feel more grounded. With every exhale, you drift closer to the peaceful edge of sleep. Now imagine the three families, stepping quietly out of 1905, back into their own time. Changed, wiser, softer. Mrs. Taylor reflects. We've had the most extraordinary food, things I've never tasted in my life, like dining in the finest restaurant I could imagine. And yet, I couldn't enjoy it fully, because my family wasn't there with me. Mrs. Golding, thinking of the quiet Edwardian evenings, murmurs, maybe it would be nice not to turn on the television all the time. Just sit together, play music, talk. And Mr. Meadows, whose mind has never strayed far from his family's well-being, confesses, I spent the whole day worrying I couldn't feed them. For the first time, I understood what our ancestors felt. That pressure, that weight. I thought I was a useless parent. I couldn't protect my daughter. I thought they were all going to be really unhappy. These realizations, about family, about simplicity, about the enduring need for safety and connection, they speak across time. They are the truths that bridge centuries and blur class lines. They remind us of what truly matters. Now, you're floating, peacefully, gently, in that perfect in-between space where wakefulness fades and dreams begin. Your thoughts are mere whispers now, soft and far away. Your muscles rest, your heartbeat a gentle rhythm beneath you. The Edwardian era, like every era, eventually gave way. Its certainties crumbled under war, invention, and revolution. But something of that world remains. In the brickwork of old buildings, the pages of literature, the lingering echoes in our culture and memory. As you slip deeper towards sleep, imagine that thread, that unbroken line of human experience, stretching across time. The Edwardian mother leaning over her children with a bedtime kiss. The father, silently worrying about money. The child, staring at the stars and wondering what the future holds. In their most honest, most vulnerable moments, they were us. Now your eyes are too heavy to open, your body too comfortable to move. With each breath, you are drawn deeper into rest. Each heartbeat softens you into stillness. The past is never truly gone. It lingers in our stories, in our structures, in the foundations we walk on, and the rituals we repeat. Our Edwardian ancestors might be bewildered by our world, but they would still recognize us. Our yearning for meaning, our fear of loss, our joy in love, in laughter, in warmth. And so, as you drift into sleep, let that connection remain. Let it follow you into your dreams. Like our three families returning home, you've walked through another world. One with lessons, with perspective, with humanity. We are separated by time, yes, but not by soul. Your breathing now is deep and slow and perfect for sleep. Your thoughts have quieted completely. There is nothing to worry about, nothing to do. Just drift, deeper and deeper, into calm, restorative rest. The stars that shimmered above Edwardian Morecambe still shine tonight. They shine on us all, across time, across continents, across generations. As you sleep, you become part of something greater. You join the human story, every life, every family, every shared sky. Sleep well, sleep deeply, and when you wake, may some part of this journey stay with you. A glimmer of appreciation for the world you live in. A tender reverence for those who came before. A small, quiet knowing that we are never far from the past. Good night. Sweet dreams. Safe passage to the land of sleep.